Hello everyone, this is Dr.SHIVA Ayyadurai. I want to discuss something very important that just occurred a few hours ago, which is a professor at Harvard, Charles Lieber, was arrested for in many ways committing not only a crime, but triple, quadruple dipping in multiple different ways to advance himself. And it's just out on the DOJ, Department of Justice, essentially attempted to detain three different people, but the headline is Harvard University professor and two Chinese nationals charged in three separate China-related cases. Now, Charles Lieber is not just a professor at Harvard, but he's the head of the chemistry department as well as the head of the Department of Chemical Biology, as I understand, chemical biology at Harvard. What's significant about this is for many, many years, I've been talking about the fact that until we see professors in academia actually being arrested, there's a whole strata of the political class which is getting away literally with major crimes and murder in many ways. And so what's significant about this, historic about this, is that the Department of Justice under Donald Trump's leadership went after a professor, and typically these guys are always shielded because they're in these quote-unquote liberal institutions like Harvard, MIT, Yale, and they're a protected class. You know, as I've shared in India, we had the caste system where you have the bottom level were the workers, and above that you had business people, and then you had, the kings, and then you had the priesthood. The priesthood were quote-unquote the academics, and they've typically always been protected. And I've always predicted until we saw these kinds of people starting to be actually arrested for the crimes that they do every day, that nothing significant was really taking place to address some of the systemic issues. So this is a historic arrest. And why is it historic? Just to give you some data, our tax dollars, your and my tax dollars, American taxpayers' dollars, go into funding many different scientific institutions. For example, they go to funding the National Institute of Health, our money's going to the Department of Defense, etc. Well, Lieber had received close to $15 million from those two funding agencies, which means your and my tax dollars, to fund his research at Harvard. His lab, which was known as the lab, let me read it right here, which was known as the lab, the Lieber Lab, for nanoscience. So he took significant amounts of money from you and I to fund his lab. But in addition to that, and by the way, so that lab money comes in, he gets to support some of his expenses as students, so that's one source of income for him. A professor like him also receives salary. It's probably, I would say, probably 300, 400K. People like Elizabeth Warren were making $350,000 for teaching one class. Plus, he's allowed to go do consulting, so he gets money from that. In this case, the NIH grant he got clearly said that you cannot have conflicts of interest with other governments. Lieber had signed, since during 2012 and 17, he was working for the Wuhan University of Technology. And the Wuhan University of Technology, by the way, Wuhan is where the coronavirus was first discovered, and there's an institute over there in virology, which is also involved in doing research on biowarfare. But he did not disclose this, but moreover, he was quite lucrative for him because he got $1.5 million from Wuhan University of Technology to establish the program there. Another $158,000 in living expenses, plus, check this out, $50,000 per month. So here's a professor at Harvard receiving quite a bit of money, and part of what he was involved in was, and then he didn't disclose, is the Chinese had set up a program called the China's 10,000 Talents Plan, which was to recruit, Chinese nationals or American Chinese nationals who are working in these institutions like MIT, Harvard, in this case Harvard, and bring them as talent into China. So here is a professor at Harvard who's being funded by you and our tax dollars to help this country. Meanwhile, he had a side agreement, not for a few months, but for 5 years, to really support China's strategic development. And what I want to share is, this is not something new. It's essentially, someone just said Swamp University. The real swamp, I've been saying for a long time, the sewer, the swamp of the swamp that feeds into DC and the rest of the world is between MIT and Harvard. The president of MIT, by the way, as you know, was taking money from Jeffrey Epstein after he knew he was convicted. So I hope this is a major turning point, because I believe this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have to understand these academics get tenure. Remember, they can work for life. I mean, they get paid for life after they get tenure. They get to work in these universities for life if they have tenure. They get your tax dollars, my tax dollars, plus they get a salary from the university, which also is funded by federal grants, which the universities also make money through endowments by taking student loans, investing them on Wall Street, plus the universities and these professors, if they do any patents from your and my tax dollars, also get to own a piece of those patents. Plus, in this guy's case, he was probably doing consulting elsewhere, and he was getting a nice, sweet deal here. So the bottom line is, I think this is quite a significant occurrence. I've not seen it done by other presidents. Trump promised that he was going to protect IP being stolen by China. And in this case, you have total collaboration from a US funded university professor in China. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of this going on. There are many professors at MIT and Harvard implicitly and and directly, literally for the highest bidder, selling US intellectual property, implicitly and explicitly in some ways, transferring knowledge to these other countries, because these universities are really not educational institutions. That's just a small front end. They're fundamentally multi-billion-dollar corporations. If you look at Harvard's endowment, it's around $50 billion is their endowment. Okay? How do they get those $50 billion? Well, they get research grants, they get money from students, they get donations, they take that money, they invest it on Wall Street, and they pay off their hedge fund managers, $50-60 million. Wall Street paid their 6 hedge fund managers. Harvard paid their hedge fund managers close to $50-60 million, 6 guys. And then, so they're running essentially a large multi-billion-dollar corporation. In this case, Harvard University, a multi-billion-dollar corporation professor, was involved in collusion with the Chinese government. Obviously, he's been arrested, etc. But I want to emphasize again, I've been talking about this, that until this occurred in the swamp right here in Massachusetts, that we would not see any major significant breakthroughs in this country. So it's great to see this, and I can take any questions if people want. Exactly, someone says the American taxpayers get ripped off again. And remember, these professors and these universities are ripping us off in multiple ways. A, they get grant money, which is our tax dollars. So that's one money they get, which goes into these professors' compensation. They also get paid by the university, plus the money that you and I pay them, public dollars, the universities and those professors share in the patents. I never understood why they own the patents. This should be patents of the United States public. And then on top of that, they get to do consulting, and in this case, illicit type of consulting. Okay, so I hope that helped, but you know where I stand on this. Again, I'm excited to see this take place. Thank you very much.